All right, so get this. We've got a ton of videos from you guys, and it seems like everybody's buzzing about this idea
Yeah.
that the Philippines might actually be the biblical land of Ophir.
It's pretty wild.
We're talking ancient maps and like historical analysis and even biblical geography.
Yeah.
Let's just dive in. What are these theories all about?
So we've got these sources that are claiming that there are all these ancient maps, some of them going back like 4000 BC,
Wow.
that pinpoint the Philippines as Ophir.
Okay.
And it's not just like one or two maps. We're talking about like a recurring pattern across like centuries.
Okay, so like give me an example. Like what's a map that really kind of stands out to you?
Well, there's one that's called the Book of Jubilees. It's said to be from around 2500 BC.
Okay.
And it apparently shows the Philippines as both the Garden of Eden and Ophir.
Wow.
And what's interesting is this kind of lines up with Ptolemy's map from 43 AD, which also puts Ophir in that same region.
So we've got two maps, thousands of years apart, both pointing to the Philippines. That's pretty compelling, but it's not just maps, right?
Right.
There are these claims that some pretty well-known historical figures also believe this.
Yeah, for sure. So you've got Duarte Barbosa, Portuguese explorer.
Okay.
He described the Ilocano people of Luzon as being like incredibly wealthy, like even more so than the Chinese,
Wow.
with tons of gold and silver.
Mm,
And then Magellan, you know, the guy who circumnavigated the globe.
Magellan, yeah.
Yeah, he seems to have connected these Leucoasts.
Hold on, Leucoasts.
Yeah.
Who are the Leucoasts?
Yeah, so the Leucoasts are basically the people Barbosa encountered in Luzon,
Okay.
the biggest island in the Philippines.
Got it.
And Magellan seems to have equated them with the people of Ophir, even substituting their name in some of Barbosa's writing with Tarshish and Ophir,
Oh, wow.
those biblical lands of gold and riches.
Okay, so you've got these early explorers making a direct link between
Yeah.
the Philippines and Ophir. But is there anything a little more concrete, like official documents or something?
There is. So in 1525, Sebastian Cabot, another explorer, signs a contract with the King of Spain.
Okay.
And in this contract, it specifically lists Ophir and Tarshish as targets for exploration.
Wow.
So clearly the idea of Ophir being a real place, potentially locatable, was taken seriously enough to send expeditions after it.
That's huge. It makes you wonder if this belief was so widespread, how did it get lost?
Right?
Like, why don't we learn about this in history class?
That's a great question. And some sources suggest that the Spanish who colonized the Philippines may have deliberately suppressed information about Ophir
Oh, really?
to control access to the region's vast resources.
So we're talking about a potential cover-up.
Potentially.
That's a bold claim. Is there any evidence to support that?
Well, Dr. Richard Vincent Naran, he founded the world's first Ophiran church.
Wow.
He argues that the Spanish deliberately concealed documents and destroyed records to protect their economic interests.
Okay.
And he points to the destruction of the Philippine National Library in 1941, which housed countless historical documents,
Yeah, what a tragedy.
as a prime example.
Especially if those documents held key information about this Ophir connection.
Yeah.
So if the Spanish were trying to hide this, how did they go about it?
Well, Dr. Naran argues that language played a key role
Okay.
by imposing Spanish as the official language and discouraging the use of native languages.
Right.
They effectively created a barrier to understanding pre-colonial history.
Interesting.
Many historical accounts that might have supported the Ophir connection were likely written in languages no longer widely spoken or understood.
So we're talking about a systematic effort to erase a whole chapter of history.
Potentially.
That's a lot to unpack. But beyond the maps and the historical accounts, is there anything else that connects the Philippines to Ophir? What about are there any linguistic ties?
There are some really compelling linguistic links.
Okay.
Dr. Naran has done extensive research on this,
Okay.
and he highlights similarities between Hebrew and Filipino languages.
Okay, like what?
So, for example, the word amen is virtually identical in both languages. Yeah. And ara, which means sun or day in Filipino,
Okay.
has a clear Hebrew root.
So it's not just like random words sounding alike. There seems to be like a deeper connection.
Yeah.
Does this go beyond just individual words? Are there any broader patterns?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So Dr. Naran points out that there are many place names throughout the Philippines that have clear Hebrew origins.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the Isaiah tribe in Bohol.
Okay.
They have a unique writing system that some describe as similar to ancient Hebrew pictograms.
Wow.
It's almost like finding remnants of a forgotten language preserved in a remote corner of the world.
That is fascinating. Okay, so we've got maps, historical figures, linguistic links. It's like we're building a case file.
Right.
But hold on, there's another layer to this whole Ophir story that we haven't even touched on yet.
Okay.
The lost tribes of Israel.
Right.
Some sources suggest that they may have migrated to, guess where? The Philippines.
Yeah, it's a fascinating, albeit controversial theory. The idea is that after the Assyrian conquest of Israel in 722 BC,
Right.
some of those lost tribes may have traveled eastward,
Okay.
eventually reaching what these sources identify as Ophir.
Wow. Okay, so let's break that down a little bit.
Yeah.
What evidence do these sources point to? Is there anything to back up this claim?
Well, there are accounts of datus, which means leaders arriving in the Philippines around that time period.
Okay.
And some of these datus had names that sound strikingly Hebrew.
Hmm.
And then there are artifacts like pottery and jewelry found in the Philippines with inscriptions that resemble ancient Hebrew script.
So we've got these datas potentially arriving from the West with Hebrew-sounding names,
Yeah.
and we've got artifacts with Hebrew inscriptions.
Uh-huh.
It's starting to feel like more than just a coincidence. But is there anything else, anything that really connects this to the biblical narrative?
There is one more intriguing detail.
Okay.
Remember the story of the three kings who visited Jesus?
Oh, yeah.
Well, some researchers suggest that it wasn't just three individuals, but a large delegation from the eastern border.
Interesting.
And get this, they believe those gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh could have come from, you guessed it, the Philippines.
Hold on, are you saying that the three kings might have been Filipino?
Yeah,
That's a pretty wild theory.
it is.
What makes them think that?
So the researchers argue that the biblical descriptions of the gifts and the journey
Okay.
align more closely with the geography and resources of the Philippines
Okay.
than with the traditionally accepted locations.
Hmm.
So think about it. Gold was abundant in the Philippines.
Right.
Frankincense is produced by trees found in Southeast Asia,
Okay.
and myrrh was a common ingredient in ancient Filipino perfumes and medicines.
Hmm.
So it's the thought-provoking interpretation for sure.
It definitely is. So if the Philippines is potentially the land of Ophir, home to descendants of the lost tribes of Israel,
Yeah.
and maybe even the source of the three kings' gifts, what does that all mean? Like, what are the implications of this?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. Some sources go as far as to say that the Philippines has a special destiny, even a prophetic role to play on the world stage.
Okay.
And they point to a passage in Matthew 12:42, which states, "The woman will rise and they will condemn the world," as hinting at a future role for the Philippines in global affairs.
Whoa. Okay, now we're talking about some pretty big ideas here. Rewriting history, uncovering lost connections,
Yeah.
and even hinting at a divinely ordained destiny for the Philippines. This is a lot to process.
It is, and we've only just scratched the surface.
Right.
There's a wealth of information in these videos,
Okay.
and we encourage you to dive into them yourself and draw your own conclusions.
For sure.
But before you do consider this, if the Philippines truly is the biblical Ophir, what does that mean for our understanding of history, culture, and even our own identities?
That's a powerful question and one that deserves careful consideration.
Yeah.
We've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive. We've looked at ancient maps, historical figures, linguistic links, and even the potential connection to the lost tribes of Israel, but there's still more to explore. Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll delve deeper into the evidence and unpack the implications of this fascinating theory.
You know, as we're kind of piecing together this puzzle,
Yeah.
one term keeps popping up.
Yeah.
This idea of a golden peninsula, or Aurea Chersonesus, as it was called in ancient Greek. It refers to a peninsula in Southeast Asia,
Okay.
known for its abundant gold.
Got it.
Now, some scholars place it in the Malay Peninsula,
Right.
but these sources argue it's the Philippines.
So basically, we're debating the exact location of this legendary gold-rich region.
Right.
And the Philippines, with its historical abundance of gold, seems to fit the bill.
Exactly. And this idea isn't exactly new.
Oh, really?
The historian Josephus, writing centuries ago, mentioned King Solomon and King Hiram of Tyre, venturing to a land of old called Ophir, but now the Aurea Chersonesus.
So even back then, people were connecting Ophir to this golden peninsula. But what's interesting is that Josephus links it to India.
Right.
Wasn't India known more for its spices and textiles rather than gold?
That's where understanding ancient geography comes in.
Yeah.
India back then was a much broader term than what we use today.
Okay.
It often encompassed large swaths of Southeast Asia.
Mm.
including what we now know as the Philippines.
So it's all about context.
Yeah.
Understanding how terms and geographical boundaries have shifted over time.
Right.
It's like deciphering a code, isn't it?
Precisely. And this is why these alternative interpretations of history are so crucial.
Okay.
They force us to look beyond our modern maps and consider how different cultures in different eras perceive the world around them.
Hmm.
It's a reminder that history is constantly being reinterpreted as new evidence emerges and new perspectives arise.
Okay, so we've established that the Philippines was known for its gold.
Yeah.
It aligns geographically with this golden peninsula, and it has these fascinating linguistic and cultural connections to ancient Israel.
Right.
But are there any actual artifacts, anything dug up from the ground that supports this whole Ophir theory?
Actually, there are some intriguing finds.
Okay.
One source highlights these bronze artifacts
Yeah.
discovered in tombs
Okay.
near Lake Lanao in Mindanao.
Hmm.
And one piece, a beautifully crafted trident,
Okay.
exhibits stylistic features reminiscent of ancient European craftsmanship.
Wait, are we talking about evidence of ancient Europeans in the Philippines?
Potentially.
Even before Magellan, how is that even possible?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
If these artifacts are indeed authentic and date back that far,
Okay.
it suggests a level of global interconnectedness that we're only beginning to understand.
Hmm.
Remember those Phoenician sailors who supposedly journeyed to Ophir with King Solomon's fleet?
Yeah.
Perhaps they or others like them ventured even further,
Okay.
establishing trade routes and leaving traces of their presence in unexpected corners of the world.
It's mind-blowing to think about those ancient seafarers navigating by the stars,
I knew.
crossing vast oceans and connecting distant civilizations.
Yeah, it challenges our assumptions about the past, doesn't it?
It does.
The world, even in ancient times, was far more interconnected than we often realize.
Hmm.
And the Philippines, with its strategic location at the crossroads of maritime trade routes, likely played a key role in those exchanges.
This is making me rethink everything I thought I knew about history. It's like peeling back layers,
Yeah.
revealing a hidden narrative that's far more complex and intriguing than what's typically presented in textbooks.
And that's the power of exploring alternative perspectives, isn't it?
Yeah.
It allows us to question the dominant narratives, to re-examine evidence,
Okay.
and to piece together a more complete and nuanced picture of our shared human story.
Okay, so let's say for a moment that we entertain this possibility that the Philippines is indeed the biblical Ophir.
Okay.
Why should we care? How does this impact us today?
That's a crucial question.
Yeah.
Beyond the historical intrigue and the thrill of uncovering lost connections,
Okay.
this deep dive invites us to consider the implications of this potential revelation.
Okay.
Imagine the shift in perspective if Filipinos were to reclaim this narrative.
Hmm.
Instead of seeing themselves as a colony discovered by Europeans,
Right.
they could recognize their ancestors as active participants in a vibrant global exchange of knowledge, culture, and resources dating back millennia.
It's empowering, isn't it?
It is.
It challenges the Eurocentric view of history and places the Philippines at the heart of a much larger and more ancient story.
Exactly. And it's not just about the past.
Okay.
If the Philippines is indeed Ophir,
Right.
and if those prophecies about its future role hold true,
Hmm.
then understanding its ancient heritage could be crucial for navigating its present and shaping its destiny.
So we're talking about potentially redefining national identity,
Yeah.
reclaiming a lost heritage, and even influencing the future trajectory of a nation that's pretty significant.
It highlights the profound impact that rediscovering our past can have on our present and future.
Hmm.
It's about understanding where we come from, embracing our true identity, and stepping into our potential with a renewed sense of purpose.
But let's be realistic. Not everyone is going to buy into this whole Ophir theory.
Right.
Some people are naturally skeptical, maybe even dismissive. They
Yeah.
might argue that this is all just speculation, wishful thinking, or even an attempt to rewrite history for nationalistic purposes.
Of course, healthy skepticism is always important.
Yeah.
We should never blindly accept any interpretation of history without critically evaluating the evidence.
Right.
But it's equally important to be open to new ideas,
Okay.
to challenge our own preconceived notions,
Mm.
and to consider alternative perspectives that might shed light on hidden truths. Isn't that what makes exploring history so exciting?
Absolutely. It's about the thrill of the unknown, the possibility of uncovering something new,
Yeah.
something that changes our understanding of the world and our place in it.
Exactly. And that's what this deep dive is all about.
Right?
It's not about providing definitive answers,
Yeah.
but rather sparking a conversation,
Yeah.
encouraging us to explore different possibilities,
Right.
and empowering us to become active participants in uncovering and understanding our shared history.
So let's play devil's advocate for a moment.
Okay.
If we entertain this idea that the Philippines is Ophir, what are some potential downsides or challenges that we should consider?
Well, one concern is the potential for exploitation.
Okay.
If the Philippines is confirmed as this land of vast wealth, like the Ophir of legend,
Right.
there's a risk that corporations or even foreign governments might try to exploit its resources for their own gain, potentially at the expense of the Filipino people and their environment.
It's a valid concern. History is full of examples of resources being exploited for the benefit of a few,
Right.
often with devastating consequences for the local population.
And there's also the risk of cultural appropriation or misrepresentation.
Right.
We need to be mindful of outsiders coming in claiming ownership of Filipino heritage
Okay.
or commercializing their traditions without respect or understanding.
That's an important point. It's crucial to ensure that any exploration or development related to this Ophir connection is done ethically, sustainably, and with the full participation and consent of the Filipino people.
Absolutely.
We need to respect their sovereignty, their culture, and their right to determine their own destiny.
I wholeheartedly agree. It's about empowering Filipinos to be the authors of their own story, rather than letting others write it for them. This deep dive for me is about starting a conversation, encouraging critical thinking, and empowering people to take ownership of their history and their future.
So it's a balancing act, isn't it?
It is.
We need to be aware of the potential benefits of this Ophir theory.
Yeah.
The boost to tourism, the renewed interest in Filipino culture, the potential for international collaborations. But we also need to be cautious of the potential risks and prioritize the well-being and self-determination of the Filipino people above all else.
Absolutely. And that's where education awareness and open dialogue are crucial.
Yeah.
We need to ensure that Filipinos themselves are informed about their history, their heritage, and their rights,
Okay.
so they can make informed decisions about how to navigate this complex issue.
It's about giving them the knowledge and the tools to shape their own narrative, to reclaim their own story, and to determine their own future.
Precisely. And that's what makes this conversation so important.
Right.
It's not just about academics and theories. It's about people, their identities, their hopes, and their dreams.
I'm so glad we're having this conversation.
Me too.
It's challenging my assumptions, expanding my understanding, and making me see the Philippines in a whole new light.
That's the beauty of exploring history, isn't it?
It is.
It has the power to open our minds, broaden our perspectives, and connect us to something much larger than ourselves.
This deep dive is taking us on quite the journey. We've looked at maps, artifacts, historical accounts, even prophecies. Yeah.
But we've also touched on some sensitive topics. Colonialism, exploitation, cultural appropriation.
Right.
It's a lot to process.
It is, and it's a reminder that history is not just a collection of facts and dates. It's a living force that shapes our present and influences our future.
Yeah.
We have a responsibility to engage with it thoughtfully, critically, and with a deep respect for the people whose stories we're exploring.
Absolutely. So with that in mind, let's move on to the final part of our deep dive, where we'll wrap up our exploration of the Philippines as the biblical Ophir.
Right.
And consider what it all means for us both individually and collectively. Stay tuned. Okay, so we've really gone deep on this whole Philippines as Ophir thing.
We have.
We've got maps, artifacts, language links, even prophecies. But let's get practical for a second.
Okay.
If this idea really takes hold, what could it mean in the real world? Like, could it actually change things like tourism, trade, or even international relations?
It absolutely could. Imagine this tourists flocking to the Philippines.
To walk in the footsteps of King Solomon's miners, to see the lands of the Lu coasts.
Wow.
Those ancient people connected to Ophir, it could be a huge draw.
I see what you mean. People travel across the globe to see the pyramids, the Great Wall of China.
Yeah.
If the Philippines is the source of biblical gold,
Right.
it would be a pilgrimage site for so many.
Exactly. And it's not just about tourism. This rediscovery could bring Filipino products and crafts back into the spotlight.
Okay.
Think agarwood pearls, beautifully woven textiles. These were highly valued in ancient times.
Right.
And they're still produced in the Philippines today.
So we could see a revival of traditional industries, more appreciation for Filipino craftsmanship,
Yeah.
and maybe even a boost to their economy. It's like unearthing a hidden treasure, not just of gold, but of cultural heritage.
Precisely. And on a bigger stage, if the Philippines is recognized as Ophir, it could totally change how they interact with other nations, especially those with ties to the biblical world.
Think about it, cultural exchanges, joint archaeological digs, even stronger diplomatic ties. It could really raise their profile on the global stage.
It really shows how history isn't just a thing of the past.
Right.
It can shape our present and even change the course of the future.
Okay, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. We've talked about the potential upsides, but what about the downsides? Are there any risks or challenges we should consider?
One big concern is exploitation.
Okay.
If the Philippines is confirmed as this land of immense wealth, like the Ophir of the Bible,
Yeah.
it could attract corporations or foreign governments looking to profit from their resources,
Right.
potentially harming the environment and the Filipino people in the process.
It's like a modern day gold rush, and we know those don't always end well for the people who actually live in those places.
Exactly. And there's also the danger of cultural appropriation.
Okay.
We need to be careful about people coming in, claiming ownership of Filipino heritage or commercializing their traditions without respecting their culture and understanding.
So it's about striking a balance, recognizing the potential benefits, but also guarding against exploitation and disrespect.
Right.
Any exploration or development related to this Ophir connection needs to be ethical, sustainable, and most importantly, led by the Filipino people themselves.
I couldn't agree more. It's their heritage, their story to tell, and their future to shape. This deep dive for me is about sparking a conversation, encouraging critical thinking, and ultimately empowering people to take ownership of their history.
You know, this whole deep dive has been quite a journey.
It has.
We started with ancient maps and ended up discussing everything from lost tribes to the potential for a nation to reclaim its narrative.
Yeah.
It's been eye-opening, challenging, and honestly pretty inspiring.
It's amazing how exploring a single idea can lead to so many other fascinating questions and possibilities. It makes you
Yeah.
realize how much we still don't know about the past and how much there is left to discover.
So as we wrap up this exploration of the Philippines as the biblical affair, what's your final thought for our listeners, something to ponder as they continue to delve into this topic?
What strikes me is this. If the Philippines truly is Ophir, it means this nation, often seen as on the fringes of global influence, might actually hold the key to understanding a much deeper, much older story about our shared human heritage and our interconnectedness. It challenges us to see the world with new eyes and to recognize the potential for greatness in places we might have overlooked before.
That's such a powerful message. It's a reminder that the answers we seek are often hidden in plain sight, waiting to be discovered by those who dare to question, to explore, and to connect the dots in unexpected ways.
So to our listener out there, keep searching, keep questioning, and keep exploring the world with curiosity and wonder. You never know what amazing truths you might uncover.
Beautifully said, and who knows, you might even rediscover a part of yourself along the way.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Until next time, keep exploring.